Welcome to a new video from Elastic Course. In this video, I will show you how to build your own virtualization server for free using VMware ESX. Now, VMware ESX is different from VMware Workstation or VMware Player in the sense that ESX is a level 1 hypervisor, which means ESX runs directly on your hardware and it doesn't need a host machine to build on. You don't need any Windows or Linux to use ESX. You just need to install ESX directly to your hard disk and start hosting virtual machines in your environment. Now, ESX also has a free version that has very generous limitation, and it's also completely manageable using a web interface so that you can do everything from the browser, including browsing to your virtual machines or starting newer ones. And that makes ESX a great platform for learning and experimenting with different products. Let's get started. First step is to head into the VMware website to download a free version of ESXi. Once you create your free account, you will be given a serial number that you can use to activate the product, and this serial number is permanent, so you don't have to worry about anything. And we're also going to download the ISO image which contains the operating system. This operating system will be our host operating system that we will install in our server. And after that, we will manage everything using the web-based interface. Now, we also need a utility like Rufus, which allows to install this ISO image into a USB drive and make it bootable. So I downloaded Rufus and I opened the app. I just selected my 16 gigs USB drive and I'm going to install the operating system ISO file into this drive by selecting the ISO file that I just downloaded from the VMware website. Now, we don't need to change anything else in the setting. We just need to click start. Now, once you get the message to replace the menu.c32, just click yes to that because this is needed to make the USB drive bootable. And this will warn you also that the flash drive will be formatted. This process will take a few minutes, and then once this is done, just plug this USB drive into your computer and then boot up your computer from this USB drive. You should get a similar ESXi installation menu. And we're just gonna go ahead with this simple process. We're gonna click enter and then agree and read the terms of service. Now, for this step, it will scan for all the hard drives in your computer. In this case, I'm downloading this to a VM temporarily so that I can screen record this to show you how the process works. So it's detecting a 400 gigabyte virtual hard disk. Once you select this hard disk, the operating system will be installed in a specific portion of the hard disk, and the remaining of the hard disk space will be used as a storage pool to host virtual machines. Now, I will select English as my language and finally choose the root password so we can log into the GUI in the browser to manage this host. Finally, we just need to click F11 to start the installation. This process will take a few minutes and then the host will reboot. Once the server has fully booted, you will get the IP address for the host so that you can simply take this IP address and manage it in your browser. So I'm gonna go ahead and log into my actual server after I installed ESX, and I'm gonna use root and the password for my system. And as you see, this is the main GUI for ESX. It's very simple platform. Show me that I have 4 CPUs, Intel i7, also 32 gigs of RAM. And finally, for the virtual flash, this is 120 gigabyte portion that was cut from the 500 gig SSD to use for the operating system and backups. Now, if we look into the top, we will see that the CPU and memory usage as of now to just run this operating system for ESX is very low compared to running VMware Workstation above Windows, which consume a lot more resources. We can see that most of our resources are actually free to be used for virtual machines. And also for the storage, we have a 337 gigabyte free out of our SSD to use to host virtual machines. Now let's move ahead to the manage menu, and we want to go into licensing. All we need to do is to assign a license and just insert this free license that we got from the VMware website. Now our product will be licensed so that we don't have to worry about licensing. Now let's get back to the host menu and let's check our storage. Under storage here, we can see that there is a data store, meaning this is a storage pool that we can use to build virtual machines. it's of type SSD and it has about 336 GB free. There's also another hard disk on the same computer, but it's not currently added in this pool. Now we can also head into the devices tab. We will see the actual hard disk we have. This is the full SSD 500 GB, and in here we also have the additional disk of 1 TB, but this is not an SSD, so this will be a little bit slower for read and write. Let's go ahead inside this hard disk, and we can see in here the partitioning diagram. This is basically showing you which operating system or which file system is run directly on this hard disk. Currently it's showing unknown because this is formatted using Windows and it's of type NTFS. So this is something not supported by the ESX environment, and if we want to use this disk to host virtual machines, we have to convert it into the VMFS or the VMware file system. And we can simply do this by going into new data store. Let's call this disk 2. Now from the partitioning option, all we need to do is to change this from custom to useful disk. And as we see in this case, our whole disk will be formatted using the VMFS file format. Finally, we click finish. This is warning us that the hard disk will be formatted. We can click yes to that. Now if we go back to data stores, we see that both our data stores are available, our SSD and non-SSD, and they are both using VMFS 6. So now let me show you how you can simply upload your favorite ISO files for your operating system to use in the future to start a virtual machine right away using ESX. So I want to use my SSD primarily to load these ISO files. So I want to go ahead to my data store 1 and I want to go to the data store browser. In here we can upload files to our hard disk or our data store. So I want to click upload, and then I will just use these 3 different ISO files as my favorite operating system to use in a ESX environment. We have a CentOS environment, we have a Bob OS, and we have a Windows server. So I want to start uploading these files, and once they are uploaded all to the server, these files can be used in the future as a CD mount where we can install them just like VMware Workstation. So now let's see how we can start a virtual machine using the ESX environment. Let's head into the virtual machine tab and let's register a VM. Now we have multiple options in here. We have our traditional create a virtual machine, which you have to define the ISO file and define everything yourself. We also have a very useful option to create a virtual machine using an OVF file, which we will explore shortly, but now let's go ahead with the traditional way first. So I want to start by Bob OS. I want to just call this Bob OS. And we also are required to define the operating system manually in this platform. So I want to select my operating system as Linux, and because Bob OS is very similar to Ubuntu, I want to choose Ubuntu 64. It doesn't have to be exact, but this is important to determine which VMware Tools package to install based on the operating system you select. I want to choose Ubuntu 64-bit and I want to click next. In here we can either use the SSD or the non-SSD hard disk for hosting our virtual machine. Let's start with the SSD since we have a space, it will be faster. Now in here we will choose our hardware specs. So I want to give this operating system 2 CPUs and 2 gigs of RAM. Also let's bump up the disk a little bit. Now as far as network adapter, if we join this VM network, this matches the bridge mode on VMware Workstation. So that means in the network that ESX lives, which is 10.255.0.0/24, our ESX was given IP address 10.255.0.20, and anything else we join to the VM network will be bridge. That means it will get its own IP address in the same network 10.255.0.0, which is very good for us. So let's keep it on VM network, but you're also able to create isolated networks or additional networks using different IP schema. In this case, I want to join it as bridge. And finally, for the CD DVD drive, this is where we can just mount our operating system that we uploaded before. So I want to choose from here data store ISO file, and I can just select my Bob OS file and click select. And now let's do next. Now everything looks good. Let's click finish, and this will be our first operating system that we install using ESX. Now let's open our virtual machine. We can click play button in here. This will run our virtual machine currently inside the browser, which is very useful and it's very nice feature. You can see everything in here. You don't have to download any application or anything like that, which allows us to quickly jump into the operating system. So now we can go ahead and install our operating system. Now this will take a few minutes to finish, but we can close out of the display. We can see in here a small thumbnail display for our virtual machine. We can also see the interactive monitoring for the CPU and RAM in this VMware environment, which is very useful. Now we can start seeing the CPU and memory spiking a little bit after we start our first virtual machine. Now let's go ahead to our virtual machines and let's create our second virtual machine for our Windows environment. Let's go ahead and click next. This one I want to call Windows Server, and this time I want to choose the Windows environment and select Windows Server 2019 from the list. We will also use the SSD for this operating system. For the CPU and memory, it's already set for 2 cores and 4 gigs of RAM, so this is good enough. We just need to change our CD drive from host device to a Datastore ISO file again. This time I want to choose my Windows Server ISO file and I want to select. Now let's click finish, and now we have our Windows Server virtual machine also able to boot from here. And this way we can also set up the Windows Server directly from the browser. Windows will also take a few minutes to install, so now we can switch back to our Bob OS. We can see in here that the system is rebooting after install, and now we are inside our virtual machine. And that's it. Now we have access to the virtual machine through the browser. Now one of the first things we need to do when we install a new virtual machine is to click action and install the VMWare tools, which help make the system more smooth and also allow us to expand the window like this and get the display to stretch out without having a fixed resolution. We can do this by going into action, guest operating system, install VMware tools. Now this is warning us about the CD-ROM because we still have the ISO file mounted in this virtual machine. We don't need the ISO file anymore for the operating system. We can override this lock. Now we can see the VMware tools disk was mounted in the virtual machine. We can use the script in this file to install the VM tools. There is also an easier way to do it using the terminal. So I want to go ahead and open the terminal, and we're just going to do the command sudo apt update, which allows us to update our package list. And we will also install a specific package called Open VM Tools Desktop, and then put our root password. Now this will update the list, and then it will download the Open VM Tools in here. This will allow us to get the best experience out of our virtual machine. So let's go ahead and click yes to that. Now if we try again to open the thumbnail, now we can see the menu is stretching, and if we try to expand it a little bit, it will expand as we go. Everything will start working smoother from this point on because we have the Open VM Tools package installed on our system. So open-vm-tools-desktop is the best package to get your VMware environment set up on your Linux. Now let's check the same for our Windows Server. It should be installed by now. So I just set my administrator password. Now also in a situation like this where you need to log into a Windows environment, you need Ctrl-Alt-Delete. We can also send that from here using the guest operating system. Send keys, and we're just gonna send Ctrl-Alt-Delete. This will allow us to log in. Now you can see the Windows Server is running smoothly on our environment, but also the same issue with the resolution. We cannot expand the display or make the window bigger. I want to do the same thing, actions, guest operating system, install VMware tools. For Windows this is very important, and there is no package that you can install from the terminal, so we just need to open this setup file for the VMware tools. This will take only a few seconds, and right away our window will get bigger, and now we have the same good experience with the Windows. We can get everything to work smoothly using the VMware tools. Now we don't need to restart right now, we just need to verify which IP address did we get in this virtual machine. And for this I will use the ipconfig/all command. As you see in here, 10.255.0.23 is the IP address I got on this virtual machine, and this belongs to the same IPv4 network as our ESX. So this is the good part of using the VM network that is inside ESX, because it will give us the bridge mode and will allow our virtual machines to live on the same network independently from the ESX. Now you also don't need to depend on the ESXi Web GUI to access this server. You can enable remote desktop on the server, or for Linux you can install something like OpenVNC, and then you can VNC to the server or RDP to the Windows server remotely without having to log into the ESX. Let's see how we can do this. Let's go into remote desktop settings, and in this case we're gonna enable the remote desktop for the server, and then we just copy our IP address for this server. Now from my own PC I'm gonna open my remote desktop connection, and I'm gonna put the IP address for this virtual machine 10.255.0.23. I'm gonna log in using the administrator and password. And as you see, I was able to log in into the server without having to open the ESX environment. This is working very smoothly, and this is running over on the ESX environment, and I'm RDPing to it from my own PC. Now similarly, in the Windows environment we also see our CPU and RAM usage, and when both virtual machines are idle, we can see in here that the CPU is barely being used and the memory is quarter way used. And we can also see the historical status for the ESX host, which represent the usage for CPU and RAM for all virtual machines aggregated. Now finally, a really good opportunity to learn and implement different machines and applications using the ESX environment doesn't just come from ISO file. I highly suggest you check out bitnami.com, which allow you to check a big list of applications that are pre-packaged for you to learn and experiment with. You can see in here there are hundreds of pre-packaged application and operating system that you can download directly from this catalog. They are already pre-configured for you, and they just give you the username and password to log in with. So this helps a lot to learn any of these technologies or any of these products. And also, if you were encountering issue or having difficulty downloading or installing any of these applications, you can simply download it where it's already installed for you and you don't have to do nothing. So for example, if you are a software developer and you want to use Jenkins and you are having difficulty downloading Jenkins on your own, you can simply open Jenkins in here and you will find different deployment offering. There is a cloud offering, there is Docker and Kubernetes, and finally there is a virtual machine option. So those options are very useful. So we're gonna go ahead and choose the virtual machine option. And as you see in here, this is coming directly in OVA format, which is the recommended format for virtual machines. So this is a little bit different from an ISO file, but it's very similar. So let's go ahead and download this OVA file. Just click, just take me to the download. Now once the OVA file is downloaded, we can directly deploy this OVA file using the ESXi. So let's go ahead and go back to our virtual machines, and let's go ahead and create register VM. This time we will choose deploy a virtual machine from an OVF or OVA file. Go ahead and click next. For this one we are deploying Jenkins, so I want to call this one Jenkins, and for here we can just drop our OVA file. We will use the SSD as well for this specific virtual machine. And we are only given a choice for our network. So this is showing bridge again for the VM network. We're gonna leave it as bridge, and we're just gonna click next and click finish. Now this will upload the OVA file for the first time, so this will take a few minutes, and then we will be able to deploy this virtual machine. And once this is done, let's go ahead and open Jenkins. As you see, the Jenkins is directly showing me the IP address for the host, and it has generated a username and password for me. So let's go ahead and access this using 10.255.0.24. As you see, I got Jenkins directly installed. I didn't have to do any of the installation. It's already pre-packaged for me. So from here we just need to go back to ESX and look into the virtual machine output. Has generated for us a username and a password, so we're just gonna copy this and go in here, enter this information. And as you see, I got Jenkins running right away. So Bitnami is a great way to learn any application quickly without having to worry about downloading and installing it. You just need to download an OVA file and you can deploy it using ESX, or even VMware Workstation will also work in the same way. Now another way to check the virtual machines in ESX other than this window is to use the VMRC application. Now if you go into Action and you go into Console, you can see in here there is an application called VMRC. If you already have VMware Workstation, you will already have this installed. If not, you can simply click download VMRC and you will be sent to this VMware website where you can download the console. And what this does, it allows you to check the same GUI for any virtual machine directly using the VMRC application. Let's now go ahead and click launch remote console. As you see, this is asking to open in VMware Workstation, or if you only using VMRC client, it will say VMRC. We can just click OK and let's connect anyway. And as you see, I can access my console for my virtual machine directly from here. I also have the host being detected and added directly to VMware Workstation, along with the other VMs like the Windows Server and the Bob OS. Now finally, if you need to take any backup of any of your virtual machines, for example this Jenkins environment, if you have modified it and now you want to keep a backup or a snapshot in time, you can do the same using ESX by going into Action, Snapshots, and then you can use Take Snapshot option. For this one, I want to call it Backup 1, and I just want to take a snapshot. Now under Snapshots, I can go into Manage Snapshot. Now we will see the backup for our virtual machine. We can create additional snapshots as we make more modification to our system. And at any point of time, if we need to go back to a previous point of time, we can select the specific backup that we need and just choose the Restore Snapshot option. Also, if you want to save disk space or you want to free up some of your virtual machines, you can go back and delete snapshots that you no longer need. This way you are freeing up space and you're also keeping the most recent backups only. And that was a quick overview for the ESX virtualization server and how to use it to run virtual machines in your own home lab. Thank you for watching.